doing these attacks?
No, and I still don't have access to it. But if you'd like to play with this, in the appendix of the paper that you'll find in the proceedings, I included a list of the functions that I've identified within the BSL. Most of them are actually subroutines, like as part of some grand switch statement. But there are also a few functions and then interesting regions of code, global symbols, and a table of those going from English names to hexadecimal addresses is included. So I printed out the disassembly of the code. And then for a couple of days I went through and I annotated the different pieces of it. The lecture that I'll be giving on the 29th in Sal 2 on repurposing the EZ430 describes the tools that I used for this. I've got a Perl script called MSP430 static that lets me say identify every function that contains access or code that writes to a particular I/O port. Okay, so in the BSL code there's a read byte function and a write byte function. And then there's a tare function that reads the 0x80 and bases a timing guess upon that. And the program is only 500 words long, 1 kilobyte. That's a hard limit by the architecture. So it's feasible for a human being to go through and to learn it all. Any others?
Thanks.
Oh, yes.
More questions? Comments? Well, if you are happy right now, I have a somewhat non-technical question. Now, you have the DMCA in the US, which probably forbids what you're doing. Do you give that stuff any thought?
Well, I mean, the DMCA is intended for media mostly, so I decided to go by the spirit of the law, I suppose.
So you don't worry that TI will send lawyers to you?
Well, I haven't found many devices which do have the JTAG fuse cut. Most devices actually leave it open. And it makes sense from a manufacturing standpoint, because if you mess up a manufacturing run and you need to fix things, the JTAG fuse is just in the way. Yeah, so.
Any look?
Do you know of any other microcontrollers where such attacks have been already done, or like the AVR, or?
Yes, the voltage glitching technique is actually rather standard for smart cards.
Okay.
As far as the timing attacks go, I haven't been able to find published prior art, but I have been able to hear that others have done it before me from casual conversation.
Okay, thanks.
So, whenever you do a password comparison on a microcontroller, realize that the device that you're speaking to can observe everything about how long it takes you to compute the password. TI's latest defense against this is to erase all of flash memory the first time the password is wrong. And on those versions, while the timing vulnerability exists, it's not terribly useful unless this booby trap is disabled. Yes?
How long did you say the timing glitch on the voltage rail had to be?
I've had luck with about 45 nanoseconds.
And you managed to generate that with the muxes and an MSP430. What speed's the MSP430 running at?
If I jump back to the picture, no, that's not it. I'm not sure how much of this is affected by the capacitance of my probe, but you'll see that it's not a very square drop.
So I was wondering if you could do it just with a cap from an I/O pin on the MSP430 going into the rail, just have a falling edge on the other side of the cap.
You can. In this case, I used the muxes so that I could switch to a particular voltage. So I can add a capacitor to a test point on my board, get the capacitor at the value that I want to glitch with, and then flip everything over. Yes?
I have one general question. I'm not that familiar with that type of microcontroller. In what type of devices is this normally used?
This is used in low-power medical devices. One of the more popular application notes is a pulse oximeter. Also, it's used in Zigbee, wireless sensor networking. TI just announced the CC430, which is an 802.15.4 wireless radio and an MSP430 within the same package. It's used in multimeters, in altimeters. I'm sure someone's built a wristwatch with it. So.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, last chance. Right.
Thanks. You mentioned software simulator. Can you get a little bit more in details which you have done there?
The simulation of the exploit, or the simulation of the timing?
It's the timing simulation. Had you built a program which rebuilt the MCU with respect to fill in the bytecode, or had you some other way to...
There is a publicly available simulator written in Python that ships with a GCC port to this architecture. There are also some simulators written in Java and C++ that I haven't had time to evaluate.
Okay, so programs of 500 machine words, I get young again. So let's thank Trevor for that wonderful talk, and see you.